Thank you for coming to our panel discussion today. I will be the moderator. My name is Dimitra Mazaraki. I am a neuroscientist, but also the curator of the art section. I hope you all visit the amazing art pieces that they are in the building. If no, please do. So today, the focus of this panel is the role of art in psychedelic research and therapy. We have 4 expertise to answer all these questions about the intersection between research, psychedelic research and art. And I will introduce them. So I'll start with Zeus Tipado. He is a PhD candidate in neuroscience at the University of Maastricht. He is originally from Los Angeles, and his research is focused on perceptual experience of psychedelics, specifically visual experience while under DMT. And he's analyzing activity of the brain in the visual cortex while people are using DMT, while inside in virtual reality. Very, very interesting. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about that. Please find him and ask him later. Then we'll go to Dr. Henrik Jungaberle, and he's the director and co-founder of the Mind Foundation. He's also the scientific director of this amazing conference. He's a public health and drug researcher, and his focus is on human development, integration, and integrity in the use of psychoactive substances. Then we have Koleka Putuma. Koleka is a multi-award-winning poet. She's also a theater practitioner, and her focus is homophobia, womanhood, race, and religion. And last but not least is Professor Dr. Norbert Palz. He's the president of Berlin Universität der Künste, which is the University of Art since 2020. He has studied architecture and got his doctorate in the Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen, and his focus is art and science. So, very looking forward to see your opinion about the subject. The topic or the aim of this panel is art and public perception of psychedelics, ethical complexities of psychedelics in art, and art in psychedelic therapy. So I will start with the first topic, arts and public perception of psychedelics. And I will ask the first question to Dr. Palz. In what ways does art offer unique modes of communication that traditional scientific methods may struggle to achieve? What is your opinion about that?
Well, I think the experience of art is, of course, a complex process. It involves conscious and unconscious experiences, and the combination of these two can pave the way for really an alteration of the action that follows after you have experience. And this can be a beneficial experience, but can also be, of course, be used for ideological purposes. In Germany, we have a history about how art, for example, was employed to activate the general mood of the society in enforcing certain ideological contents. So I think in difference to science, which is mostly focused on a rational approach in which methodologies and research results are clear, there's an hardwired aspect of ambivalence within the arts, which constitutes it as a dialogue instrument. And this is, I think, what is interesting. And of course, the other point is that this dialogue is based on the possibilities of the receiver and the artist. So if we change the one or the other, new things can emerge. And I think what I'll later talk about is a little bit how psychedelics can also affect this outset on the side of the artist, but maybe also the outset of the receiver.
Great, thank you. I think very insightful. And I would also like to ask the same Koleka. What do you think about the loss of communication with think traditional methods and what art can offer more in this subject?
I think maybe to speak a little bit about my where I come from. Artists deal with stories, and the basis of art is the human being or the human condition. And telling stories is what connects the artist to the audience. And art has a great ability to do that without it trying to be over there or up there. And it's something that people can connect with and relate to and find themselves in. And so I think that the gift of artistic practice and creative work is that it has a way of demedicalizing language, and also putting the research into narratives or into materials that people can connect to or connect with, in a way that doesn't feel too far away or out of reach or inaccessible.
Great, thank you. Does anyone want to add something in that? Or, of course.
Maybe one word. I think what resonates with me is when you're describing art as a narrative process. And of course, we narrate all kinds of stories all the time, and they are related to our identities. And that's where I am very interested in. How can we create more fluent identities? How can we understand how to transform identities? And I would say most pieces of art are not systems, rather processes. They develop, they change through the perception of the viewer. And that's where I, coming to our topic of psychedelic therapies and psychedelic practices or therapies, I'm sometimes concerned that there is a certain artistic theology that has developed that is a little bit rigid and is rather there to tell other people, this is us. It's more an identity politics. And I'm just looking forward to see more flexible, more open forms of art coming into the psychedelic practices.
Yes, I guess also in the communication is very important, right? Historically, for many years, art is the main way of communicate, right? So, very important. Okay, then I would like to continue to the next question, which I would like to ask Zeus. How does art, or how do you think art supports the understanding of the psychedelic state?
So, I mean, honestly, I probably have a different approach. I don't think they actually enhance art at all. I don't think these substances actually alter art to the point where it enhances the process. I think it probably just alters the process. It alters the creation of art. So I don't really believe that they enhance any sort of creation of art at all. They just make the process a little bit more difficult, more weird, perhaps. But it's probably the answer that you really don't really want to hear. But I'm not that convinced that these substances actually help artistic creation or creativity as well.
Thank you so much.
So we don't have enough, I don't know, it seems like the information that we have about psychedelics and art is it increases divergent thinking, which is very interesting, but divergent thinking isn't really a sort of quantifiable thing when it comes to creating, or when it comes to quantifying art, like the actual art process. So yeah, it increases divergent thinking, yes, it decreases convergent thinking, but divergent thinking necessarily isn't translatable to art or building art or like creating art.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Palz, how do you think that art historically has played a role in shaping and influencing the perception and understanding of psychedelics within the population?
I mean, especially since modern times, the artists have been always interested in exploring a field of the unknown, in moving towards a metaphysical realm, or expanding other dimensions. In the early 1920s, you had a wave of artists exploring four-dimensional space. So in this context of exploration, there was an interest of the artists to also experiment with mind active substances, to see where the parameters of human perception and human consciousness are, and if they can be altered. So in that sense, there's a long line that potentially, and I'm not an art historian, and I'm basically a guest to this conference, but I would assume that you can really trace back artistic practices way back before that. So there is something in the way we relate to the world that is negotiated through the arts and through the artist's practice. And that's why I think there is really a value in this. And there's a long historical line to this. So that's why I think it is very easy also to translate it into our contemporary times, because it relates back also to history and to the artworks that were created with such sensibility. And I really would like to stress that it's not only about psychedelics, but also other forms of ritualistic transgressions of our normal state.
Great. Would you like also maybe to, Henrik, to say something about your presentation, or?
Just wanted to lead to that. You prepared a presentation, and it would actually be nice for our discussion if you would give it so that we could refer to it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. What is it referring to me, to myself? I didn't catch the.
No. I'm Norbert.
Oh yeah. Sure. I'm down to hear it. Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know, maybe there was an understanding. So because I've written a little lecture that tries to map the field, and but I don't want to, let's say, disrupt the structure.
Of course not.
If that is okay with you.
I think it fits wonderfully with this question. That's why I feel that, yes, if you feel like describing it's very nice.
We just step back one slide before, please.
Yeah, of course.
So, dear everybody, distinguished guests and fellow participants of the Insight Conference, as I stated yesterday, and I will gladly state it again, I'm deeply honored and excited to stand here and sit here before you today to discuss the intriguing relationship between art, science, psychedelics, and the exploration of human consciousness. I also would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Mind Foundation for this remarkable opportunity to share my thoughts with you, especially to Henrik. As the president of the Berlin University of the Arts, it is a venerable institution that has roots dating back to the late 17th century, but considers itself as an educational and research structure of the 21st century. It is a privilege to be here. The UdK has evolved into one of the largest and most diverse universities of the arts globally. Our university encompasses the full spectrum of arts and related academic studies spanning fine arts, architecture, media and design, music, performing arts, dance, and much more. We also have a full university status and take pride in our ability to confer doctorates and postdoctoral qualifications shaping the future of creative minds here in Berlin and elsewhere. Today, my aim is to delve into the intersection of psychedelics and arts. Specifically, I will explore how art serves as a potent communicative interface through which we establish insight and aesthetic experiences. We would like to trigger reflection and, in the best case, fostering an emotional and intellectual growth. This discussion from my side, will focus on professional fine art practice. I'm not looking into the therapeutic uses of art. And I think it's very important to differentiate this. Because they are deeply intertwined with art history, theory, and their relevance to the societal changes we are facing today. So it is not about a mere mapping of individual mental states, but rather an exploration imbued with cultural significance, introducing elements of ambivalence, criticality, and autonomy. Art possesses a profound ability to evoke emotional sensations that transcend purely conscious processes, as I stated before. These experiences can penetrate deeper spheres of individual consciousness and psychological disposition, thereby influencing subsequent behaviors and actions. Thus, they carry an ethical and a societal relevance. This can have positive but also negative effects. As an example, our school in the 1930s was an opportunistic institution that was willfully educating students in the mindset of the National Socialism. So we were educating people that would later then work in the cultural sphere, producing artistic content that would empower an ideological content to the general public, hereby creating a deeper attachment between the public and the ruling party. So it is not an innocent practice. But at the same time, we must also recognize the potential to harness this power for the greater good of society, to reinforce ethical and virtuous incentives. Having set this context, I will now turn my attention to the subject of psychedelics, neuroscience, and their interplay with the arts. So the next slide, please. In the general public's eye, the connection between psychedelic and art is often associated with a vivid countercultural imagery that emerged in the 1960s. A rich color palette, traces of surrealism, and dreamlike compositions. Yeah, okay. However, my interest today extends beyond these iconic depictions. I'm more intrigued by the abstract, conceptual translations of psychedelics in art and exploration grounded in novel insights gained through controlled psychedelic experimentation and the advancements of neuroscience. This approach allows us to consider how psychedelics can profoundly affect the fundamental framework of our consciousness and our representative models through which we engage with the world. It conjures the possibility that controlled psychedelic experiences can lead to a different state of consciousness and a deeper understanding of the basal traits of human condition and how we relate to the world around us. To illustrate this perspective, and the next slide, please, I'd like to discuss two noteworthy projects from different periods. First, we have Henri Michaud's 1950s drawing series of mescaline drawings. Michaud's experimentation with mescaline, a naturally occurring psychedelic substance, led to a fusion of text and drawings that challenged traditional artistic boundaries. In his own words, Michaud stated, "I first took mescaline to see if I was capable of having luminous and colorful visions. I considered myself a kind of a cripple. All my dreams and inner mental images are in dull gray." However, as he ventured further into the experience, he found that the search for luminous images was secondary to the possibilities of the drug for exploring the mind itself. "What immediately interested me," he said, "was the rapport between the image and the idea, between the wish to see something and what one sees. In mescaline, one finds an independent consciousness with its own world of images. One learns what it is both to have and not to have a will." In Michaud's artistic output during this period, text and drawings blurred into each other, with the drawings oscillating between seismic mappings, not unlike recordings of electroencephalograph, and almost figurative shapes. This experimental approach identified a visual territory in which the parameters of artistic expression melted away. The semantic content of the text dissolved and became a line that constituted a drawing, a black shape against a white background. Michaud's approach towards psychedelic was a rather analytical one, bearing an almost research-like character. It is essential to note that in his private life, the artist was not a user of drugs for recreational purposes. Michaud was abstinent and had prior non-convincing experience with opium, a drug that was rather prominent in artistic circles, with figures such as Hector Berlioz, Thomas de Quincey, and Jean Cocteau as heavy addicts.
Sorry, Professor, so yeah. I do appreciate this talk, but we don't have a bunch of time at this panel, so we would really like to have time to talk, because it seems like, and I don't take any offense, but we would also like to talk. Or do we also get time to present our research, or is that how it goes? Or?
Of course. I was about to say that it's wonderful, everything you say, but because we have a bit of limit of time, we have still 25 minutes. Maybe we proceed to the questions, or if you want to say like a closing thing for this presentation.
I mean, I'm more than happy to start a discussion, but when I was invited here, I was asked to give a lecture of 15 minutes, so that this is what I prepared. And
yeah, so I didn't know that arrangement occurred, so sorry to interrupt you. I think it's really nice what you say, because there's 4 speakers, and I appreciate it as well, but I would love a discussion and hear
okay.
opinions, if that's okay, just be 25 minutes.
Okay.
This is obviously due to us not connecting enough before this conversation. Why don't we make a compromise and ask Norbert Palz to summarize?
Yeah, I agree, and I summarize will be great.
Okay.
Yes.
Get into a discussion.
I don't know if I can.
This is definitely something valuable that we can.
I try to see if I can. If I can summarize it, but anyway, I mean, I think to really cut it short is what I see is that through the use of psychedelics, my conjecture is that we create a different conception of the model of the mind, and this model is potentially one that has that can create a different relationship that we have with others and with the world around us, which is beneficial and allows us also maybe to create a shared platform of aesthetic preferences beyond a Central European, rather non-diverse set of artistic experience that have been shaping the past so far. So art can play a vital role in Central Europe, and that what and also when we look at museums and so on, there's a quite hegemonial conception of what we conceive as art, and that is based on a modernistic tradition. And I think expanding the scope of rituals and expanding the way we conceive our consciousness can lead to a different practice that is broader than that and allows also other voices to be heard. So there's let's say, a positive outlook in this. And my hope is that we create situations, and I think as a public institution, it's not so easy to speak out loud, that I think it is a valuable enterprise to integrate psychedelics into artistic education. So we need the link to science, and we need the link to research institutions like Charité, but I think it's a worthwhile path to go forward.
Great. Thank you for sharing all this information. I think it was very important to hear that. And sorry for stopping you earlier, but yes, just for time limitations, unfortunately, we need to continue the discussion. So the next topic of our panel is ethical complex. For time, of course.
Can I ask my colleague if he would like to respond to
So yeah, so it was really interesting information. But as I said, I I'm really not that convinced that psychedelics helps with that sort of, artistic creativity, because there's a bunch of art that isn't built on, people on LSD, tripping on LSD. So how would you account for that artistic creativity? Would you say that it's just outside of the bounds of psychedelics, or would you say that psychedelics actually enhances artistic creativity, which is, I think, what you were saying, or what, yeah. But, yeah.
I don't want to talk too much about, but I mean, my understanding would be that we move away from just a pure pictorial representation of psychedelic experience that we've seen in the past, but this is that the use of psychedelics can allow us to gain a different access of what we conceive as our consciousness and what is our mind. And I think if this is changing, then the art that follows, whether it is a sculpture or a theater piece or a piece of literature, is affected by that. So it is more, let's say, an abstracted way in which this affection takes place. And there I'm pretty convinced that there will be a different art form emerging. But it's not an exclusive one, of course. So I don't want to put a hierarchy in different kind of artistic practices. I think it's whatever suits the person who's doing this is allowed to do whatever he or she thinks is needed.
I think that it's, I'm thinking about the fact that, to depict psychedelics in the pictorial sense that you're talking about, or in the literal sense, for example, in the theater space that I work in, it would have less or as much of an impact as it would, let's say, if you were to put maybe violence on stage, for example, where people, if they were to see, literal use of psychedelics or a literal interpretation of psychedelics, it could kind of make people kind of feel like, oh, that's not me, or that's not for me, and they sort of switch off immediately. And I'm thinking specifically about South Africa, the context that I come from. In the theater space already, like you work with bodies, you work with other people, you work with other actors, people come into the space. When we come in to collaborate and make work, people bring their bodies into the space, people bring their voice, their breath into the space, which is sort of at the core of what the psychedelic journey sort of needs from you, is your body and your breath, to sort of be the vessel for whatever that journey is going to be. And so I recently was prompted by my own explorations and some of my friends in journeying with psychedelics to think about how the afterwards of it can inform the processes of making, and how it is that we approach the work, and how the things that were found along the way can be integrated into the work, or inform the making of the work, and not so much what it looks like or what the final product is at the end, but more so what is it that is changed about how you think about making, or how you think about bringing your artistic process to the making of the work, and then how does that shape what it is that you do make. For example, I always identified as a writer, and I just told you that I make theater. And then there came a point where I kind of felt very divorced from speech or speaking, or I came to the realization that there's a theater or narratives that are reliant on speaking is something that I wanted to sort of divert from, which is a problem because I make money from writing and from speaking. And so how do you then I had to start investigating how to weave other elements of the psychedelic states or the psychedelic experience into the making of the work, to be able to talk about that in a way that's not literally showing the use of it, but rather what was received from the process of it, if that makes sense.
But I think this is what I wanted to express. It's not about it's really not about direct link between what you see as the artistic product in its appearance, but rather a form of derivative finding out of the experience and how this affects your mind and your consciousness and the way you relate to your practice. So it has an openness, and it's not immediately traceable. And by that, and if I understand you correctly, it's also not creating boundaries between the one that has had this experience and the one who hadn't. So it's supposed to allow communication between everybody, but with a different outset, maybe a more refined one, maybe a more real one. I mean, we are very much shaped by the Enlightenment, and we have an inner hardwired concept which allows us to think in a certain way, and certain things are excluded. So I think there's a potential of making these borders more porous, and that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask, so what evidence do we have to actually say that these substances actually does what you say, like it sort of, blends the boundaries of artistic creation and artistic execution? Is that what you're saying, that it blends the boundaries of creation and execution so that we can actually make art? What do psychedelics do to actually enhance art or to get people to think differently? What like evidence do we have to say that it does?
I don't think that the practice itself, that can of course change, but that's not the primary goal. I think what you said, it would be interesting if through that a different form of thinking and conceptual ideas could emerge that are not translated, whether in a more traditional way or if there are new forms of artistic expression that can emerge from that.
So when I'm listening to the other speakers, I had the need to focus on two simple questions that maybe it's my interest, but it's related to what you all said. So what do we want to do with the psychedelic experience? And what do people want to do while they have the psychedelic experience? And then I related to the conference, we talk a lot about medical uses, and very often we also have a very restricted form of using the body and the expression. People often lie on a bed with eye shades on, and obviously this is not the only thing that people can do while under the influence of a psychedelic. So that's the first thing, a critique of the medical way of using it. I'm not saying that there are not other ways, but of the way of using it right now. And then, from what I understood from Norbert Palz, I think having the courage to use psychedelics as a tool to investigate what can happen in the moment, as a process, a processual tool that goes far beyond what we do in medical practice. In medical, you have something. Somebody comes to you. She wants something from you, and so relief from suffering. So you need a strategy to go there. And what I heard there, is that true? That it's a processual way of dealing with the state without really knowing where to go.
I'm sorry, Henrik, for interrupting, but yes, the time is running and we have only 10 minutes, and I'm sure it's a very important topic, but I think there are some more topics that I'm sure you will also like to discuss more extensively. So would be okay if we can, go to the next topic, or if Zeus, you want to have a very short answer.
I think we should totally go. Unless...
Very short answer.
Well, I'm thinking about, okay.
Okay, great. I'm sure okay. So I'm sure the next topic, it's very interesting as well. So you must have said some things there. So Yes, the next topic is about ethical complexities of psychedelics in art. And my question is to Koleka. What do you think there are these actual ethical complexities that surround in the representation of psychedelic experience through art? Like, what are the ethics there, and what's...
I think that maybe there's someone else on this panel who's better equipped to answer this. But I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about
Maybe a little bit, yes, maybe I can help you a little bit too. Like, what do you think it's the responsibility from the art part for the psychedelic practices? Or safeguard, maybe, yeah.
I think that maybe this might go a little bit to what you were asking, Henrik, about the why, like understanding the whys of why it's being used or how it's being used. And I think to just circle back to what I was saying earlier about, it's not about the literal representation of it, in the work that you are making, or maybe let me speak for myself, in the works that I'm making, but more so about thinking about what it is that you want to do with the interpretation of the research that's come from the research that you've done, and how it is that you interpret that into an artistic medium. The other thing is that a lot of people don't have necessarily all the information when it comes to psychedelics, or have immediate access to information or education about psychedelics. And I'm thinking about specifically about where I come from. South Africa is still very much a conservative society in many ways, and to even, it's only recent that a clinical trial has been approved, but even who gets to know about that clinical trial and how much information that they have about it, it's a very specific group of people. And so in many communities, if you say the word psychedelic or you talk about psychedelics, it's gonna freak people out because people are thinking drugs. And so how you were talking about, how do you use avenues to say what you want, or how to get the information to people, is super important. And so when I think about the work that I'm interested in and what I want my artistic practice to do, which is to facilitate dialogues with people, but also to maybe think about the ways that we can heal, but also heal in our communities. I think the language that is used to think about all of this and used to talk about it, and how we offer up information and offer up ways that people can get to information about things is super important. I think like the language of it is something that needs care and sensitivity and thought and imagination. Language as in text language, as in visual language. I mean, I'm also thinking about the film that I made with some friends, which is showing downstairs, which is thinking about the legacies of colonization in South Africa. But we were also wanting to think about something called the DOP system, which was a system during apartheid where farm laborers were paid with cheap wine on the farms that they worked. And so that were known as the DOP system. So the cheap wines were known as DOP. So they would pay the farm laborers in DOPs. And essentially the legacy of that is that now you have a society in South Africa that is struggling with alcoholism, like people are, in South Africa, we use alcohol to sort of deal with our social ills. But then the knock-on effect of that is that the healthcare system is impacted, communities are impacted, homes are impacted, right? So how do we make a film that talks about this? How do we facilitate language and dialogue that can sort of direct people to the conversation that we want to have. And that is, we created a dancer in the film called the Mushroom Dancer, who essentially, when you look at the Mushroom Dancer, they are wearing, a long wig, and they've got these long nails. And the image and the aesthetic and the language of that is something that you can make connections to some people that you can recognize in South Africa in the groove and in the dance and in the party space, but also the movement of it is something that is very specifically located in South Africa. But then within that, what is the thing that is driving that dance? So what is the thing behind that figure in the film? And so when I'm talking about language, I'm talking about how do we dream up and imagine different ways of talking about the healing and the dialogue that we want people to have that is not so focused on the medical language itself, but bringing it back to the people that we want to communicate with.
So to communicate, to dissect down topics that are very difficult to discuss, right? Yes. Communication, and I guess also throughout body language, not only written language, right? Okay, very interesting. Anyone else would like to add something? We have only 5 minutes, and I would like to proceed to our last topic, which is art in psychedelic therapy. And I think, Henrik, you are more expertise in this topic. So I would like to ask you, how could art play a role in the process of psychedelic therapy?
Can we skip that topic? They were interesting panel, and it's much better to answer and to react to what we said here. So maybe I'm also not the one who wants to react to what has just been said. Maybe Zeus has something. Do you want to follow?
Follow with art therapy and psychedelics?
No, the question, I think that's what Koleka said probably.
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of like hit it on the head. I mean, honestly.
You nailed it.
So, I mean, we sort of associate psychedelics and art creation in a very positive way. You take LSD, you build whatever. But, I mean, art can be pretty bad too. Like propaganda is also art. So we shouldn't really assume that we trip out and have positive affirmations of our own reality. It could be very bad. We could sort of build art to hold people out of communities or, hold people back. So it's something that we should sort of get.
Do you see that in some psychedelic?
Yeah, there's some right-wing psychedelic art that's pretty extreme. Brian Pace actually did a fantastic talk on this at ICPR. He talked about the sort of right-wing ideology being promoted with psychedelic use. And it's something that has to be actually addressed. Like, it's a problem on the internet, on Twitter, on TikTok even. So psychedelics, it could sort of, alter.
What about going to the other political spectrum?
So.
Isn't there art coming out of the more progressive side?
Yeah, so
art coming out of the more progressive spectrum that is also limiting other people to assess psychedelics.
But I mean, come on, like, we all understand that, like, the right-wing ideology didn't storm it stormed the entire capital of, like, my country. It wasn't the left wing taking over the country. So we can't really equate left-wing ideology and right-wing ideology and say it's the same. It's completely different, And I think it's a problem whenever you have psychedelics and right-wing ideology and then art, because you can build mythologies that hurt people, that are built on oppressive thought processes. So there isn't you can't equate left. I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, so ego is just ego. Like, we all have ego.
What about specifically, like, I find some people use psychedelics as a tool to reduce ego, but those that are using it to try and do art are almost.
So I mean, ego is like a Freudian term that we should sort of like throw in the trash. It's kind of pointless to even bring up ego and psychedelics, because does it really dissolve ego, or does it just something else that we don't really understand? So it dissolves the ego within a person. I mean, but like, does it?
I'm
Either purposes of what?
Making people more individualistic or
Yeah.
having that connection. I think there's a difference in how people use psychedelics.
Yes.
Whether they're using it to try and create art or whether they're making a piece of art during therapy.
But connecting with like what though? Like what group, what community, you know? That's, yeah, is the problem. That could be the problem as well. Like, do you want to, build art to connect with a community that's like, eventually a bad community, a nefarious community? I mean, it happens all the time. So yeah, but that's more of a human condition as opposed to a psychedelic condition.
I mean, I would question if there's actually something like right-wing art, because I think ingrained in my conception of art is something which is an ambivalent message. So it's not a monodirectional information that is going from the creator to the receiving end. But I think there's always something that needs to be negotiated, and if the message is basically one-to-one, then it loses the ability as an instrument of dialogue and interpretation. So I could see it. Of course, there's a big probably. I'm not so let's say skilled in this field, but I could see that there's certain kind of visual output that is triggering emotions. But if we really look at what we conceive as an artistic practice, I think there's always a criticality and something which needs to be negotiated, and where information and output are not seamlessly kind of overlaid. So this trade of art is something that is not going very well with a right-wing ideology, I would say. It has shape and form, but it is essentially not something I would conceive as an artistic product.
Yeah, I'm sure. Actually, you know what? Let's go to the next question.
At the end of the panel time, I would just like to say it's good that we also have panels that fail. I think that's what has happened here, because maybe different reasons, maybe not enough preparation, or
not enough time.
We wanted to do too much, or had different things in our head, and so this is a very nice failed panel, because I learn a lot. I learn a lot on how to go on. I really feel that we need more time to discuss art in psychedelic, in the psychedelic space, and sort out all these different perspectives. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, also thank you. I tried to moderate it as good as I could, but
Fantastic job.
But I really like the discussion, regardless some different opinions, and I think this is what panels should be, right? Should have different perspective from the different audience, right? So I don't find it as a failed panel. It was very interesting, actually. Yes, I like this diversity. I really like this big difference in the opinions. And just the last thing, if I can say, about the right-wing art in right-wing, I mean, a very simple thing is that some galleries are very expensive to enter. This is very stupid, but something that maybe accommodates the art wing art.